That war has dragged on since. And that war has been bloody, and Saudi Arabia in this war has indiscriminately killed civilians. We're talking about over 200,000, at least going out projections to the year. But at this point, it's estimated over 100,000 people that have died. And this is including forced starvation, this notion of weaponizing disease in this case, and yeah, outright bombings. If you remember, several months ago, they bombed a school bus. Saudi Arabia just got hit. And Saudi Arabia oil fields are on fire. 5% of the world's oil up in smoke. Essentially, 2 either cruise missiles and or drones hit their targets. There were 2 oil fields hit, but one is a major oil field. And yeah, 5.7 million barrels a day up in smoke. And it is unclear when Saudi Arabia is going to be able to get this back on. Now, what's the issue here? The United States has been helping Saudi Arabia in this murderous war, meaning all of these hundreds of thousands of people being killed, many of which, mind you, are just children, and again, a flagrant disregard for civilians. But now the world is on edge because Saudi Arabia got hit. Nobody cared about the kids. Nobody cared about the forced starvation. Nobody cared about the weaponized disease, and certainly didn't care about it under Obama. But now, everybody's up in arms. Saudi Arabia just got hit. The oil fields are on fire. Britain even issued a statement saying the Houthis need to cut it out. The Houthis need to cut it out. Nobody cared about the weaponized disease. Nobody cared about the weaponized starvation. Nobody cared about all of those hundreds of thousands of people being killed. But right now, the world is on edge because Saudi Arabia got hit. Again, the United States has been helping Saudi Arabia with this, be it with logistics, or we even found out in a secret document that was accidentally released to the press that there were operations using our personnel in order, again, to carry out this particular war. The thought is that Iran did this. At the very least, that's what the United States has come out and said, despite the fact that the Houthis claim responsibility for doing this attack. The United States has claimed Iran did it. The catch here is I wouldn't necessarily be all that shocked if the Houthis were working with Iran, where Iran upgraded their military capabilities, in which case they can carry out this attack. Wouldn't be shocked in the least. And guess what? I don't care. It's not my issue. It's not my problem. This is an issue that is over there dealing with Saudi Arabia in a war that they started, and despite the hundreds of billions of dollars of weapons per year that they buy from us, could not beat a bunch of rebels. This is their issue. They got themselves into this war. They get themselves out of this particular war. And the fact that they can now get hit, they can't go crying, saying, oh my God, I can't believe they hit us. We need somebody to do something about it. But despite me having that point of view, the issue is, what does Donald Trump do? Fact is, Donald Trump has painted himself into a corner. And right now, Donald Trump is putting out tweets essentially threatening military strikes on Iran for something that the Houthis have claimed credit for. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you enjoyed this content, you find yourself coming back here often, please like this video, share, and subscribe. Of course, you can always support through PayPal or Patreon. After Saudi Arabia got hit, Donald Trump put out this tweet. Saudi Arabia oil supply was attacked. There is reason to believe that we know the culprit. We are locked and loaded and depending on verification, but we are waiting to hear from the kingdom as to who they believe the cause of this attack and under what terms we proceed. Think about what this tweet is saying for the moment. A totalitarian regime, a backwards regime that literally chops off heads, puts heads on spikes, and that still engages in crucifixion. We, the United States, and the brave personnel that get into our military are locked and loaded and waiting for them, that backwards country, to tell us how to proceed. Meaning our military personnel may be used at the behest of this murderous government. This country engaged in a war where they were killing and murdering civilians en masse And now we are supposed to be getting more involved in this conflict? That is utterly ludicrous. That's ludicrous. Presidents, going back to FDR, have been somewhat obsequious to Saudi Arabia with this notion of the petrodollar, that oil would be sold in dollars and we will give them protection. And herein comes this notion of protection. The catch is, again, the Houthis claim responsibility for this. Saudi Arabia was in a war with the Houthis, and the fact that Saudi Arabia got hit is part of those things of war. If Iran assisted the Houthis, so what? The United States has been assisting Saudi Arabia. Why should I care? And yet, here we are. Mike Pompeo comes out and immediately says this.
The cadet. What's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
My bad. That's the wrong video. I don't even need to show you a video. Mike Pompeo immediately came out and said, Iran did it. Now, I am not entirely, I wouldn't necessarily be shocked by this notion that Iran may help the Houthis in upgrading their military technology, but Pompeo, without any evidence provided at all, a guy who screamed on stage that he lied, cheated, and stole, and that was just the way he operated, that now he wants you to believe him when he says it was Iran. Zero evidence has been provided for this, but again, the intelligence services that sold you weapons of mass destruction in Iraq now wants you to believe them at face value that Iran was the culprit. And even if Iran was the culprit, I don't care. The Houthis said they did it. That's enough for me. I can go on about my day. Saudi Arabia got themselves involved in something, and now they want to run to the United States for help on how to get out. Tulsi Gabbard, as you know, service in the military and foreign policy is her thing, has a statement for Donald Trump.
Yesterday, President Trump offered to place our military, my brothers and sisters in uniform, under the command of Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the dictator of the Islamist Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Trump said we are locked and loaded, but are waiting to hear from the kingdom as to who they believe was the cause of this attack and under what terms we would proceed. Now, Mr. President, as you know, I have never engaged in hateful rhetoric against you or your family, and I never will. But you're offering our military assets to the dictator of Saudi Arabia to use as he sees fit is a betrayal of my brothers and sisters in uniform who are ready to give our lives for our country, not for the Islamist dictator of Saudi Arabia. And for you to think that you can pimp out our proud servicemen and women to the Prince of Saudi Arabia is disgraceful. And it once again shows that you are unfit to serve as our commander-in-chief. As a member of Congress and as a soldier, I and all of my brothers and sisters in uniform have taken an oath to protect and defend the American people and the Constitution of the United States of America. There is nothing in our Constitution that gives you the power to go to war without the express consent of Congress. What to speak of giving you the power to offer our military to a foreign power like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to use as they wish. President Trump, your words and actions are a betrayal of my brothers and sisters in uniform, the American people, and our Constitution. My fellow service members and I, we are not your prostitutes. You are not our pimp.
Tulsi Gabbard has a point there. Trump does not have authority to do military strikes like this. Meaning, Trump has no authority to go to war against, I suppose, Iran in this case, without going to Congress first. Let's talk about the politics for the moment. Trump is cornered. And I've said this going back a very long time ago. Oftentimes, what the president wants is subordinate to political wins. Trump has created a certain political win. He decided on a maximum pressure strategy. The JCPOA is passed. Trump gets in office and kills it. Iran stays with it for a year, and after a while, they start saying, look, we're not going to stay with a deal if the United States is not going to be with this particular deal, and if you and Europe are not protecting us. So we have no reason to be in this deal. And they start pulling out certain provisions of the deal, even though they still talk about it within the context of the language of the deal. Trump goes with a maximum pressure strategy and put mad dogs like John Bolton in charge of this particular strategy. And what do? They call the Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization. They put on sanctions, one sanction after the next, more stringent than the next, essentially squeezing the country. And Trump goes with this notion that he's doing this in order to get to Iran to come to the negotiation table. Essentially, to knuckle them under, to squeeze them enough, to get them in a subordinate position where they will prostrate themselves for the United States' whims. This strategy was comically inept. And I said months ago that there is no capacity for negotiation in this. And not just no capacity for negotiation. This is the only place that this could end up with is Trump de-escalating or a war. Trump has assiduously said he didn't want a war. And yet here we are. You decided on a maximum pressure strategy. You decided to send military assets in that particular region. You decided to fly drones over their airspaces. You decided all of these things. In one situation after the next, it seems that Trump, or at the very least one of the main situations, backed off. Bolton, Bloody Gina Haspel, head of the CIA, and Pompeo all wanted Trump to fire, to attack Iran after that drone was shot out of the sky. The catch is, a drone that deals with spying will most likely spying on Iran as opposed to being in international airspace. And I tend to believe Iran on this because, again, it's a spy drone. The United States has every reason to lie about the whereabouts of that particular drone. Either way, a drone is shot out of the sky. And what's the first thing the media asks? Are you going to attack Iran? Are you going to attack Iran? Are you going to fire missiles at Iran? Trump turns away and says, somebody stupid made a mistake. Why did he do that? Because he doesn't want a war. And that's his way of saving face in a sense of saying, look, somebody made a mistake. I don't need to, launch missiles on this front. There's nowhere else to go. Iran has started to pull out of the deal. And now that they've started to pull out of the deal, Europe is somewhat freaked out by this. And if we're being honest, Europe should support Iran, right? I mean, ultimately, if you're a person sitting on the moon looking at this, you have a deal among multiple nations. One nation, the United States, pulls out, and the other nations equivocate on who they should support. What do you mean? You're unclear on who you support. You support the person who's sticking with the deal. And by all measure, that was Iran. But the EU didn't do that. And for a year, they allowed Iran to take the brunt of everything that the United States threw at it. Europe doesn't want a war. The United States doesn't want a war. Iran doesn't want a war. But I've always said that doesn't really matter. When brinksmanship is at stake, sometimes countries step over the line. Donald Trump's strategy almost depended entirely on this notion that Iran would not do anything back. The president that did not want a war apparently also did not consider that Iran may take actions that are asymmetrical against what you're doing. He never considered it. So now you have a situation where your intelligence services are blaming Iran for an attack on Saudi oil fields. And the question becomes now, what do? Your maximum pressure strategy has put you in a position where you have nowhere else to go, literally. Take a look at this. Is Ayatollah Khomeini. You often see Rouhani, but Khomeini is the one that's in charge. Listen to what he says. He is essentially saying what I've said for almost a year.
آمریکایی‌ها کسان زیادی در دنیا هم همینجور میگن فشار حداکثری آمریکا نتوانسته ایران رو به زانو در بیاره. البته قطعی هم همینه، قطعا هم همینه. اگر بخواهیم سخن رو در دو جمله خلاصه کنیم، یک جمله این است که مذاکره با آمریکا یعنی تحمیل خواسته های آمریکا بر جمهوری اسلامی ایران. دوم این که مذاکره یعنی نمایش موفقیت سیاست فشار حداکثری از سوی آمریکا. اگر آمریکا حرف خودش رو پس گرفت، معاهده درباره هسته‌ای را که نقض کرده بود اگر توبه کرد و برگشت به این معاهده شد عضو کشورهای معاهده کننده، اون وقت در جمع کشورهای معاهده کننده که شرکت میکنن با ایران صحبت میکنن اونم شرکت کنه. بدون او هیچ گونه مذاکره‌ای در هیچ سطحی بین مسئولین جمهوری اسلامی و آمریکایی ها اتفاق نخواهد افتاد، نه در سفر نیویورک نه در غیر سفر نیویورک.
If the United States doesn't return to the JCPOA, no negotiations are possible. No negotiations will take place at any level. Doesn't matter where the conversations is happening, none will take place. Their point is, there's no way for us to be in a situation where you are threatening us and you get us to capitulate and work with you. You've pulled out of the deal and you've burned the moderates of this country. There are no moderates left to make this case. This will never happen. And that's the catch. They should have understood that. If they looked at it from the standpoint of what would the United States do in a situation like this, where you take somebody hostage, in this case, the country itself is being threatened, you might as well say they've taken the country hostage. Would the United States negotiate under threat? The answer is most likely no. So why on earth do you believe that Iran would negotiate under threat? You've pulled out of a deal, and after you've pulled out of the deal, you've threatened them in all sorts of ways, and then you expect them to come back to the deal. What's the most likely outcome? The most likely outcome is a war. You're trying to topple their government. If their government doesn't topple, then at that point, you're just killing civilians. I mean, because again, sanctions kill. My point is this. He's the head of that government. He's saying there's no negotiation possible if Trump doesn't go back to the JCPOA. And now we're at a point where Donald Trump is in a position where his intelligence services is telling him Iran did this. What does Trump do? What does Trump do? If Trump attacks Iran, he loses control entirely of the situation. You can make an argument that he's already lost control of the situation because his intelligence services is blaming Iran, is saying that Iran attacked Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is running to the United States for help. If the United States attacks Iran over Saudi Arabia, that is a travesty in and of itself. But Donald Trump entirely loses control of the situation. He believed that Iran wasn't going to respond to all of these threats and posturing that the United States has been taking. If they assisted Yemen, he was wrong. They did respond. They just didn't respond in the way that he anticipated. This is 5% of the world's oil. An attack on Iran, that number will go up. 10%, 15%, 20%. What does it look like when oil hits $200, $300 a barrel? All because Donald Trump started a strategy of maximum pressure. He has nowhere else to go. Either you back down or you attack. There's nowhere else to go. The media is asking you, are you going to attack? Your intelligence services just said Iran did this particular attack, that it wasn't the Houthi rebels, despite the Houthi rebels saying that they did it. Intelligence services, completely trustworthy intelligence services, are saying Iran did it. So what do you do, Donald Trump? You said that these guys had did all of this other stuff. There was a litany of items that Donald Trump said Iran was responsible for. And now they've attacked your ally. What do you do? You've tried to avoid a war, but now it seems like you're stuck in a situation where, are you going to attack Iran or are you going to back down? If Trump attacks Iran, he loses all control of this situation. And at that point, he would be praying to God that Iran doesn't respond. And if you believe that Iran doesn't respond, you are insane. If you believe that Iran would allow the United States to just attack it outright, willy-nilly, without any response, I have a bridge to sell you. Is it possible? Yes. Is what most likely will happen? Are the attacks on Saudi Arabia escalate? Yes. This is 5% of the world's oil in one attack. They seem to have no capacity to stop the drones or to stop the cruise missiles with the weapon systems that apparently they bought from the United States. Meaning those oil fields are open to be bashed and attacked. And it doesn't seem like they can do anything to stop it. Javad Zarif comes out and essentially says, this is the foreign minister of Iran, Having failed at maximum pressure, Secretary Pompeo's turning to maximum deceit. The United States and its clients are stuck in Yemen because of the illusion that weapon superiority will lead to a military victory. Blaming Iran won't end the disaster. Accepting an April 15 proposal to end the war and begin talks. May. Talking about Yemen. And he's right. Vietnam, Afghanistan, all these places will say that. I'm talking about Soviet Union with Afghanistan and, of course, the United States with Vietnam. And by the way, when the Soviets were fighting in Afghanistan, it was the United States, if you remember, they even made a movie about it, that gave rockets in order to shoot down the helicopters that the Soviet Union was using to massacre the population in Afghanistan. Charlie Wilson's War. They made a movie about it. Meaning, the United States assisting in Afghanistan, militarizing those fighters, radicalizing those fighters, and giving them weaponry in order to attack the Soviet Union was lionized so much that they put it in a movie. Iran doing the same thing for the Houthis. Horrible. 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 Absolutely horrible. If you are a person on the moon looking at these events, you would think this is the weirdest thing in the world, that people would automatically take the United States' word for it after the biggest blunder on the planet with weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There's no reason to, right off the bat, believe what the intelligence services are saying. And I got to be honest, even if it was Iran, I can't be moved to care. I can't be moved to care. Let Saudi Arabia fight its own battles. That's where I'm at. Damn it, Jamal, you promised a mic pop filter. Rich Goyette. I'm going to get that mic pop filter, but today was not the day, man. Today was a horrible, horrible day. And I am fortunate to even be doing videos today. So there's that. Trump didn't arrest one swamp creature. In fact, he hired them. Yes, that's true. Bernie is not going to start new wars. He has a history of voting against it, even when not politically expedient. Yes. I agree. Fuck the Saudis. Yes. This is not my responsibility. The Saudis got itself into trouble in that region. Let the Saudis deal with their own shit in that region. For that matter, let Israel deal with its own shit in that region. It is not my business. It is not my responsibility. They have taken a tact. Do you know that Israel has attacked Iran, or has attacked Syria, in which they would call elements of Iran? Now, Iran is allies with Syria and is in that country legally. Israel has been attacking that country for almost 2 years. Saudi Arabia and Israel has created a fulcrum of power in that region, and Iran has been one of their enemies. Israel and Saudi Arabia are willing to fight to the last dead American in order to pacify their enemy. And here we have, amazingly convenient, oil fields on fire. I have no idea what happened to those oil fields. I'm not even beyond the point of view that Saudis did it themselves in order to increase the price of oil, or for that matter, to pull the United States into a larger conflict with Iran. So, I'm unclear on this, and I would make the argument that you should be too, since nothing has been presented that would even get across that Iran had anything to do with this. And the only reason I would say Iran might have augmented the capabilities of Houthis was because, well, Houthis didn't necessarily have this level of technological sophistication in their prior attacks. And definitely not anything that could hit Saudi Arabia like this. So, sorry, Jamal, hope you feel better. Oh, I don't feel bad. It's just been a fuckfest of a day. I get to the radio station with maybe an hour to spare. And I realize I didn't have my power cord, so I have to go back home in rush hour traffic to try to get there and back in time. I tried to call Mrs. Thomas. Mrs. Thomas is asleep at 4 p.m, which even that, if I'm being honest, annoyed me. I'm a human being. She could be asleep anytime she wants. It's just so happened that in this particular moment, there's things that I need and I need her help with, and she's like completely checked out and unavailable. And I'm like, it's 4 fucking o'clock. Why are you asleep? So as I am driving home, I get a call from the gentleman at the radio station that I'm working with saying, your computer is cracked. Your monitor is cracked. You need to bring your other computer. I don't have another computer. I know, dude, but your monitor is cracked. Are you hearing what I'm telling you? I don't have another computer. And I'll check on it when I get there. I was like, there's no reason that thing should be cracked. I only put it in my bag and drove it to the radio station. I get to the radio station. He's right. I get there, however, about 10 minutes late, and he's trying to carry it for me, and I plug in just in time, and he's like, all right, well, he's here. Well, I'm not really ready, which means that I have to start without having any kind of lead time or anything else. And so it takes a while, but it's going, and they get a new phone system. And the new phone system has this large buzzer that goes off when somebody calls. So it's like, ding, this is bad enough the phone rings, but then the buzzer goes off, beep, beep, beep. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm looking up at the thing like, all right, that's pretty horrid as a new feature here. And Ron picks up the phone and starts talking on the phone loudly, where it can be heard through the system itself, but not just through the system itself. It's if somebody is like, you're trying to do a show and somebody's like right here and they're talking on the phone, it is some of the most disruptive shit you would ever have in your life. And so this happens like 4 times throughout the show, which means the show was horrible. And I don't like having bad shows. I think bad shows suck. And so I end up having to scrub the show and get rid of the show, and kind of be like, dude, let's not do this. Let's not do this. From the time I got up to the time I finally got back home this evening, because at that point I was trying to find a warranty on my laptop, which there was no warranty, which means the laptop is just fucked. And just as a last minute thing, my wife had this thing that we were using when she was traveling, which kind of functions as a monitor. And so that's kind of how I ended my day. Essentially with a broken laptop and this kind of weird rig setup that I have and that I'm using now. This was a fuckfest of a day. It wasn't a health thing. It was just one technological fuck up after the next. Krillin 876, do you know what is going on with Israeli elections? Yes. So, from my understanding of Israeli elections, Benjamin Netanyahu may lose this election. Apparently, the exit polling has it that Netanyahu loses. But we know how exit polling was in the United States. Sanders supposedly is going to either be win or lose by like 1 or 2. He loses by like 12. Like that type of stuff, where it was always in the direction of Clinton against Sanders, despite the fact that the exit polling would show something different. The exit polling was wildly off of the 2% margin that we consider to be fraudulent elections. Netanyahu apparently is losing this election, at least based on the exit polling, but we have to wait on the actual polling to see what the results turn out to be. So, and I got to be honest, I'm not sure it matters. Honestly. And to show you my point, this was one of the videos that was put out. Oh, by the way, this is funny. Donald Trump comes out with this tweet for the oil. But look at what Donald Trump said back in 2014. Saudi Arabia should fight their own wars, which they won't, or pay us an absolute fortune to protect them and their great wealth. Trillions. Apparently, the Donald Trump that we have now needs to talk to the Donald Trump back in August 2014. Take a look at this, talking about the Israeli election. When you make the point that says it's like poop versus crap, pretty much. This is, take a look at this. This is one of the ads that the competitor, not Netanyahu, the competitor ran. Just so we're clear, by the way, Operation Protective Edge killed 2,200 people, more than 2,200 people, 80% of which were civilians. This ad starts off bragging about that campaign. Just so you know where we're starting. Right off the bat, that's where we're starting. Look at this. People were living here. This video is extraordinary. This is a campaign ad, not as a hit video, but as a video saying, look at me. I was able to murder all of these people, and this is what I did to Palestine. Now, keep in mind, 80% or the majority of the water, looks like 90% of the water is unusable in Palestine. Services are entirely dependent upon Israel, and many of those are essentially degrading or falling apart. And Israel continues to export or expropriate more and more land. Netanyahu's opponent is starting off with a video showing the devastation to people who are already dirt poor. And in a campaign that killed 2,200 people, 80% of which were innocent civilians. That's where we're starting. That's what this video is essentially chest thumping about. And it's giving you stats. Hamas suffers a major blow. That's great. All of these terrorists. So just to give you a clear, this notion of at the end of the day, Israelis are voting for people like this. And Netanyahu apparently is not even the one that's to the right or the far right, even though from our standpoint, the Likud party is full of fucking lunatics. Ultimately, though, Netanyahu may lose the race to this guy, the guy that's bragging about murdering 2,200 people, 80% of which being civilians. And let's just say killing 2,200 people, 80% of which were innocent civilians. That's the Israeli election. Whether Netanyahu wins or loses, the situation for the most part stays the same, or may even get worse depending on what this guy ends up trying to do in office. So yeah. Damn, just got the notice. What's going on, Trudy? It is a disgusting ad garden. It is. Like, honestly, man, think of what he's bragging about. Do you realize Gaza, for the most part, is what was Palestine has been essentially eaten away at all the way up to the 2010 where we are now, where pretty much little to no land left. That land has been expropriated and has been taken, essentially stolen. This ad brags about a campaign that the overwhelming majority of the people that were shot were civilians. If you look at this thing called Breaking the Ice, where they talk to Israeli soldiers, and Israeli soldiers are being honest, they were saying, look, we were told to shoot anything that moved because if anything that was in this particular area was part of a war zone, it was fair game. Didn't matter if it was kids. Didn't matter if it was people who were just there. Ultimately, if you were in a particular area, you were fair game. They were using dumb bombs, meaning the missiles or the bombs that they were using weren't targeted or anything else. They were used to cause maximum destruction and terror in the population. This ad is bragging about a campaign that was essentially a large swath murder of civilians. And I can say that since 80% of the people that were killed were civilians. And ultimately, outright destruction of a particular region. Bragging about this. You're right, Garden. This is a disgusting ad. Let's put it mildly. This guy is up to this point winning the election. Don't get me wrong. Netanyahu would essentially do the exact same ad, so don't misunderstand me. But I guess that's kind of the issue, right? Regardless of who wins, essentially both of these people, for the most part, are hardcore right-wingers or from in the same area in regards to their thinking. Thing is, Netanyahu is enshrined in all sorts of criminal proceedings and may be spending time in jail, let alone trying to win the prime ministership. So we'll see. I mean, currently, Netanyahu is also defense minister. So even if he loses the election, who knows if he still stays on as defense minister. But yeah, that's where we're at in regards to Israel's election. JT, did you hear about Biden and corn pop? I didn't hear about Biden and corn pop. That's the funniest shit ever. Biden showing how much of a tough guy he is by telling corn pop to get off, getting off the swimming line. I need to find that video with him talking about that stuff. That video is hilarious. It may or may not have happened. Who knows? I don't think it matters. Ultimately, Biden is losing his mind. And the later it gets in the night, the more sundown Biden goes. So if he could handle himself well and handle his hands well all the way back in, 1930? Good for him in 1930. Would you want Muhammad Ali to be president of the United States towards the end of his life? Let's say the last 4 years of his life. Love the guy, but no, probably not. And I say the same thing about Joe Biden. There's a cognitive capability that's necessary to do the job, and Biden is not up to the task in any real measure. And I'm sorry, there's nobody that can look at Joe Biden, give one incoherent speech after the next that oftentimes doesn't really have much of a substance to it, and tell me that that man who's losing his mind should be president of the United States. Yeah, just saying. All right, I'm going to end this here. Like, share, subscribe. Think so.